Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I have a one-page layout for you. This is a layout that's going to be in Eli's baby book. I pulled out this super old collection from PhotoPlay called About a Little Boy, and I am going to be documenting some photos of Eli having tummy time at Nana's house. The very first thing that I do that's different about the sketch is that I rotate the sketch. I have these three photos of Eli on a blanket on the floor enjoying tummy time. I did use the Project Life app to put two 3x4 photos on a 4x6. I do have a video for that and I will link it here for you. I love using the Project Life app to make my photos smaller so that I can fit multiple photos on a layout. I decided that I would just leave the two photos together since I knew I wanted them in a row, and then I had the third photo at the top. The sketch calls for basically strips of paper as well as the photos to cover a majority of the layout. So this is one of those collections that I keep hanging on to because I do enjoy it and I don't have a lot of baby boy stuff or really babies stuff in general. I really think that I will probably purge this pretty soon because the colors are just very muted. I decided to use the yellowy green color that has all of the letters on it on the far left hand side. And then I used the polka dot paper in the center with that 3x4 card that says, sometimes the smallest things take up the most room in your heart. And I'm going to use that as my title. And then over on the far right hand side, I have that like quilted pattern paper. I'm not exactly sure if that's the technical term for it, but that's what it looks like to me. And then I pulled out my distress inks in an orange to ink up all of the edges. I felt like the pattern paper was getting lost on the white background, so I decided to pull out this teal paper and mat all of the pattern paper and the photos on that teal paper. I did leave a little bit of room between the pattern papers, and of course, I had to pull it up because they weren't the same size. But once I pulled them up, got them cut down to the right size, I then put them back down with just a very small border around the edges. I really wanted that teal color to stick out. And I almost put that card upside down on my layout. But luckily I caught it before I actually put it down. So I have the polka dot paper down, my card, and then I start to work through the photos as well. So I have these three photos. Eli is just so stinking cute with his super long hair. These photos are not that great, but I definitely wanted to get them documented and into his album. Recently, he's really enjoyed looking through his album and looking back on his baby photos. Of course, once I get everything down, the alphabet paper wasn't down straight, so I did have to pull it up and use my T-square ruler to make sure that it was straight. Then I pull out my layering guides and I'm going to cut a border around all of the sides. I love these layering guides. I do have a tutorial for them. I will post it here. And then they are also linked below if you would like to purchase them. Do know that there is an affiliate link, so I do get a small commission for those purchases at no cost to you. So once I get the entire grid cut out, I put it back on the white cardstock, and I love the way that that looks with the teal against the white. I have this one additional photo that is cut down to a 2x3, and I do decide to back that on white cardstock just so that it doesn't get lost on that quilted pattern as well as overlapping the photos. Of course, I have to pull out my T-square ruler to make sure that I get that grid piece down straight. And I did put the grid on the lower half of the layout. I then decide to put the smaller photo up on fun foam just to offset it a little bit against those photos. I added some liquid adhesive on the back of the fun foam using my glue press because I have had some issues in the past with the ATG not sticking. And then, of course, I decided to stitch. So my thought process was that I was going to take those white rectangles in that quilted pattern and put a line around the inner edge of it. But then I decided that I was going to cut out a couple of my embellishments before I stitched off camera. I have had a lot of issues with the feet of my Big Shot not staying in place. I have taken all the feet off, and that did not work well because it slid all over my mat when I was trying to use it. And then I tried to take a couple of them off. It doesn't sit right. I have tried to use super glue on them. I've tried banging them in place. They don't stay. Have you guys ever struggled with this? Is this something that you have a fix to? If you do, please let me know in the comments because it is starting to drive me bonkers. Now, I know this Big Shot is super old. I bought it back at Tuesday morning a long time ago, but there's nothing really wrong with it except for the fact that the feet don't stay in place. So I don't really want to purchase another one unless I really have to. It still cuts things out, it still works fine. So if you have a solution to keep the feet in place, please let me know. I decided that I was going to cut out some larger stars because I really am following the sketch in regards to the star placement, as well as I decided to cut out some really tiny stars. So I'm using Nicole's technique of stacking them too high with the white cardstock. And then I also cut out the pattern paper. I do have a larger star die, and you can see in the upper left-hand corner that I cut out a circle as well as a couple of larger stars. I knew I wanted that gray circle down at the bottom. There isn't a lot of gray in the collection. Some of the polka dots are gray, and then there's a little bit of gray over in the quilted pattern. I really wanted to pull that gray in. And I think I've talked about this before in another video, but sometimes I feel like there are all of these like pastel colors, but there's never really a strong contrasting color. And I felt like it was the same way with this. That gray is so dark and contrasting against all of these pastels that I love that look. I love the look of the wood grains and the darker colors in girl collections as well. That outline star that's up in the upper left hand corner, I really like that, but it doesn't end up making it on the layout. And actually, I have no idea where it ended up. From some point of it being on the layout right now to coming back later on after I stitched, it somehow got lost. I struggle so much with placement of tiny things. I feel like they're overwhelming the layout, they're not really placed in the right place, and I just don't do well with it. I tried to follow the sketch, making sure that the placement of the items were in the exact same place. That didn't work, so I decided to take a little bit of break from the star placement in the top, and I knew I wanted to stitch around that orange star on the gray circle. So I pulled out my stitching tools and I just poked holes around the star. I do have a plan to stitch off camera, so once I got those holes poked, I decided to try again at the top. I knew I wanted to have that green gingham circle up on fun foam, so I went ahead and added it to the back of the circle, and then using my glue press, add it down to the layout. I then added my stamping block on top of it to add some weight so that it doesn't bow. And then off camera, I stitched on my layout. I slowed it down here so that you can see that I added a single white stitch to the very top. I stitched that quilting pattern over on the far right. I also stitched the word heart in that tag, and you can see that I did go over the letter R's in room and your. The font went that way, and I feel like you can still see the word and make out what it's supposed to mean. I also stitched around that orange star, but I forgot to show it to you guys. But you'll see it in the close-ups at the end. I do add fun foam to the back of that circle as well, and I don't put it down just yet because I want to make sure that I have the placement correct. I knew I wanted a larger star down at the bottom, but I couldn't figure out which one I wanted, so I decided to start working at the top with the stars, and I struggle so much with this. I'm adding the tiny stars, I have the bigger shaped stars, and then I realized that I didn't have enough color contrast. And the sketch also calls for another circle up there in the top part of it. So I pulled out this orange paper and I had to make sure that I placed the stars and the circles in specific places because I didn't want those polka dots to really shine through. I was okay with it showing a little bit, but I really wanted the orange color. I also pulled out the 3x4 cards so that I could get a couple of different colors that I needed. I cut out a star in this like yellow color. I tested out this kite paper, but I wasn't really liking it, so I put that aside. I also tried out the alphabet paper, wasn't liking that. Tried out the polka dots, definitely did not like that. I knew I needed another backing, so I did cut out some in white as well. And then on this 3x4 card, there was a kite that had a little heart in the string of the kite, and I really liked that. So I placed the star specifically in a spot, used some washi tape to make sure that I kept it in the exact same spot, and I was able to cut out a heart. I also found a balloon that had that red color in it. Since that heart was red, I needed to pull in additional colors there. And in that same 4x6 card where I cut out the heart from the kite, the other kite had 4 different colors and they met in the center where the heart was. So I placed my star die on top of that using the washi tape to make sure it stayed in place. So I add down the orange circle and quickly realized that it was way too far to the left. So I pull it up and move it over and then trim off the edge. And then I also decide to go ahead and put the gray circle down as well. I stack up the stars and add that pink one down. And I really like the way that that pink has a contrast with the green gingham and the orange. I also added that star down that has the heart in the center of it, as well as the star with all 4 colors and the heart in the center. And I feel like that was the issue before. I had my tiny stars in there and they were just way too small. So having these larger stars at the top as my starter worked out so much better. I also still struggled with the star at the bottom. I did add that gray one, but I decided that I would continue to work with the cluster at the top. My thought process was that I was going to have those 3 stars right there where the circles were, and then I was going to have the smaller stars kind of swoosh upward and go off the page, kind of like a shooting star. So once I got the placement somewhat what I liked, I went ahead and used my glue press and my tweezers to get some of the stars down. And I feel like I am really liking the way that this looks. I did decide to not put all of the pattern paper on the stars and only pull in the pattern paper when I knew where I wanted it to go. This way, it gives me the opportunity to have the exact right pattern paper on the stars, and I don't have a bunch of extra pattern papered stars that I knew I wasn't going to use. I have no problem having extra white stars because I can always use those. And these stars are so tiny. It took a little bit to get them up. So once I got the stars down, then I pulled out my color box in yellow and added some of these really sparkly enamel dots. And I love the contrast of the stacked stars with the enamel dots. And this is where it finally came together. I then pulled out my orange color box and added some sparkly orange enamel dots. And finally, I pulled out my blue color box and added some blue enamel dots as well. Then I started to work on the cluster down at the bottom. Now I did keep out the orange, yellow, and blue enamel dots that I had used at the top so that I can make sure to add them to the bottom cluster as well. I did decide to add a couple of the enamel dots right there on the gray circle because they were kind of getting lost on that polka dotted paper. But I did add several stars to that cluster as well. And then once I got the stars in place, I did test out the blue enamel dots, but I didn't really like the way that it looked. So I just kept adding stars until I felt like it was finally looking good down in the bottom right. Off camera, I did add some journaling, and it's super simple. It just says Eli enjoying tummy time at Nana's house. And then in the upper right hand corner, I did add a half circle and I added the date on that. And I will tell you that I did that because I put the date on there flat because I really was enjoying that look, and I put the wrong date. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I don't usually do one-page layouts, but for Eli's baby album, I am really trying to fill in some photos. And as you know, I did not have him back then, so I don't have a ton of photos like I do now. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.